Since I was 18 years old, I've always lived very frugally. Some would say I was a frugalist, others say I'm doing FIRE, and today I want to give an honest conclusion after 10 years of sacrifice and explain why I stopped last year. And with that, welcome to Northern Finance. My name is Alex Black.
Hi, my name is Alex from Northern Finance. This video was translated with the help of AI so that we can reach more people in their own language. A native speaker has reviewed the translation. Still, some sentences might sound a little unusual. Thanks for being here and enjoy the video now.
Yes, this is going to be a deep video today. Before we get into my personal details about frugalism and FIRE and how exactly I did it, let's first briefly define both terms at the beginning. Frugalism comes from the English word frugal, which means thrifty. So you choose to live a very frugal lifestyle and invest as much of your monthly income as you can manage in order to have more later on. The acronym FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, and of course, living frugally helps you reach that milestone as a lot of money is saved to achieve this goal. Both concepts just go hand in hand. There are always frequent media reports about frugalism and money saving, but unfortunately, they often show highly extreme examples like this one.
Aspiring pro wrestler Matt Rivera has landed a dream audition with one of the world's top wrestling organizations.
It's a pro wrestler's dream come true, but it's in Kentucky, so that's kind of a cheapskate's worst nightmare.
I was wondering how much per gallon is your gas over there, regular?
A flight from his hometown in New York to the audition in Kentucky would cost nearly $500. But Matt plans to make the trip for a quarter of that.
Or this report here, for example.
I normally don't spend money on clothes. I haven't bought any clothes in probably 8 years. The last time I bought underwear was 1998. I don't think I've ever bought socks.
Many people assume you have to do the craziest things to live frugally and retire early, but I see it a bit differently. So today, I want to show you my own path after 10 years of sacrifice and frugal living, and I'll do it in a very transparent way. If you enjoy this and want to see more, feel free to support this video with a like and a subscription and share it with your friends as well. So let's get started. 11 years ago, I was just 18 years old. I had just finished my Abitur in Germany and started studying law at Goethe University in Frankfurt. Back then, I had practically no money and was still living at home with my parents. And to be honest, I didn't find law as a subject particularly exciting. But then there was this one moment that stuck with me. A certain Christian Lindner, who would later become Germany's finance minister, gave a talk at an event held right there at the university. The event was called Fuck Up Night. He spoke about his own failure as an entrepreneur back in the 2000s and about how failure shouldn't be condemned or looked down on. Instead, he said, you should see it as an opportunity to learn from your mistakes and do better the next time. Failure is just simply part of entrepreneurship. That left a deep, lasting impression on me and significantly reinforced my desire to try entrepreneurship myself and to eventually become wealthy. Yeah, let's not kid ourselves. Of course, wanting to get rich was also a big motivation, especially as an 18-year-old young man. At the same time, I also read a lot of books like The Richest Man in Babylon, for example, and you could say that from this point on, from 2015, I fully jumped on the FIRE bandwagon. Entrepreneurship was supposed to lay the foundation for that and eventually generate a much higher income. Because even back then, I already knew that if I wanted to reach this goal, I mainly had to work on the income side of the equation, not obsess too much over cutting expenses. And that's exactly the mistake many people make, because you can't keep pushing your expenses closer and closer to zero forever. At some point, you hit a limit, but your income is theoretically unlimited. And beyond that, I also didn't want to spend my entire life being satisfied with constant sacrifice and giving things up. Let's be honest, it's nicer to have more, at least in my opinion. For my youth, for the time at university though, that was totally fine, even good. I just knew that in the long run, I didn't always want to live like that, but for now, it really worked. And that's why even at that point, I was already looking for ways to somehow increase my income as a student. So that became my new long-term goal. 6 months after starting university, I realized that law simply wasn't for me, so I successfully dropped out of my degree in Frankfurt and then moved on to Leuphana University in Lüneburg to study business administration in English. That turned out to be one of the best decisions I have ever made. At the time, I had 800 euros a month to live on. 400 euros came from my parents. That was the child benefit plus a little extra on top. And the other 400 euros came from a student loan from KfW Bank. At that point, I deliberately chose to take on debt because I didn't want to get a part-time job or anything like that. I really wanted to focus fully on my studies and on potentially building a business alongside them. And that's a mistake that many frugalists make. They forget that their human capital, their own productivity, is much more valuable than saving a few extra euros every day. I want to emphasize this again because it's so important. If you use your human capital correctly, it's extremely valuable. Much more valuable than being able to save a few extra euros every day. When I arrived in Lüneburg, I continued to live very frugally, as you can see from my lovely breakfast here with cheese bread and a smoothie, both from Penny. And, well, I barely had anything left at the end of the month, let's be completely honest about it, but I still managed to save 50 euros every single month, and I invested it back then in an MDAX ETF just to build the habit. The penny market next to the university kept me fed on a budget, and at Leuphana University, I already started developing ideas for my company Northern Finance in my first semester, and yes, I even presented them to an audience to get direct feedback. As it turned out, my idea wasn't fully developed yet, and I had to take in quite a bit of negative feedback along the way, but looking back, that was exactly what I needed because I still had a lot to learn. The organizer, Professor Fulton, helped me make a bit of progress and gave me some valuable input, and for anyone who wants to start their own business, I can highly recommend his book. And if you enjoy this more personal type of video, then take a quick moment to support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot. That really is a huge support. During this time as a student, I also often bought used clothes just to save money, like this jacket here, for example. I actually really liked it, and in my view, buying secondhand clothes is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, it's one of the best money-saving tips out there, especially when you don't have that much money. I also made my own coffee instead of buying it out every day, but I was never the kind of radical saver my friend Aaron from Homo Economicus was. Back in 2017, he made this legendary video where he spent an entire month living on just 50 euros for groceries. I wanted to save sensibly, but above all to maximize my income, because then a high savings rate more or less comes naturally, you know. And the university also supported me in developing an entrepreneurial mindset because it offered a lot of interesting opportunities beyond the regular lectures. One example was the Startup Weekend, where you team up with fellow students, develop a business idea together, and then prepare a proper pitch for it. I didn't let that opportunity pass me by, and while my fellow students lost interest after the weekend and didn't want to continue, I kept working intensively on Northern Finance and just did it myself. The cheese sandwiches stayed, as did the affordable food in the cafeteria, which is still available today. I really appreciated that, and I also continued to seek help from one of my professors. That was crucial in helping Northern Finance get started on YouTube, instead of pursuing a much more complex business model that I originally had in mind. So that's what my home office looked like back then, everything improvised, and that's how I recorded the first videos here, when everything was still just PowerPoint presentations. On the wall above, you can also see my big goal, to reach 1,000 subscribers before going to China, where I was supposed to spend my semester abroad that fall. Going out honestly wasn't possible that often, but I did manage to make it to a few student parties. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any pictures of those anymore. I continued to live very frugally, and 3 days before my flight to China, I also reached the goal of 1,000 subscribers on the channel. And when I was in China, I had already been making a video every week for Northern Finance for a year, and while I earned exactly 0 euros in the first year, a year after starting, it suddenly became 400 euros per month through affiliate links. That was about as much as my fellow students who had part-time jobs earned per month working at the bakery or at the gas station. And now I had the same income, but suddenly it was no longer tied to my time. It was scalable. The more people watched the videos and invested, the more I could earn. But this didn't change anything about my lifestyle. I had a wonderful time in China, which was also very affordable, and it opened my eyes to the fact that I can really live anywhere in the world if I just have the courage to do so. In 2019, I wrote my bachelor's thesis, and I somehow managed to combine it with my business as well. The thesis was about P2P lending platforms in the Baltics. So for my research, I traveled there and filmed a number of interviews on site with the different platforms. And of course, besides using those interviews for my bachelor's thesis, I could also use the footage for YouTube at the same time. At that point, my income from Northern Finance multiplied to about 2,000 euros per month. That was in the summer of 2019, and I combined it with an internship at HSBC Bank in corporate banking, which allowed me to invest 1,000 euros per month, even as a student. A few months later, in March 2020, I finished my studies, and in spring 2020, I could have started at the bank, but by that time, Northern Finance was already self-sustaining. At the time, I was probably earning around 2,500 to 3,000 euros a month, and I thought to myself, I want to see how far I can actually take this. I also didn't want to look back years later and blame myself, wondering what might have happened if I had really gone all in. So I simply pushed through and kept going. Around that time, I was living back at home again, which meant I could increase my savings rate quite significantly, up to around 2,000 euros per month. Honestly, at that point, I had hardly any expenses, but it never really occurred to me to just blow the money now just because I had more. For me, the habit of living frugally was already so deeply ingrained after university that the question never really even came up. Then, after the first lockdown in the summer of 2020, I also moved to Cyprus because I already had the feeling that I might be able to build something much bigger here, and if that really turned out to be the case, Cyprus could potentially be the better location for me in the long run. That's why I moved into this cheap, bright green 2-room apartment in Paphos for 500 euros a month and made sure to keep spending as little money as possible. That's also why I bought my Suzuki off-road vehicle for 3,500 euros. I didn't have much more money for a car anyway because I just wanted a cheap and reliable car here. I had a lot of fun with it over the next few years, especially off-road and in the mud, and the car turned out to be very reliable. At that time, I was living on about 1,200 euros per month, even though I was earning more than 3,000 euros per month. And for me, yes, that was entirely natural and logical, because although frugalism is often defined as being thrifty, the ultimate objective is to make the gap between income and expenses as large as possible. And while many people suddenly start spending more as soon as their income goes up, upgrading their lifestyle, driving a bigger car, renting a nicer apartment, or whatever else, I basically kept my expenses frozen at something close to a student lifestyle for a few years. And that, in hindsight, was the real superpower. It's one of the main reasons why I can sleep so peacefully today. If your income keeps rising but your ego stays grounded, the world is yours. Honestly. And the next few years continue to go well. I was able to keep scaling Northern Finance. Now we also offer the website and videos in Spanish and many other languages, and for a very long time, I didn't significantly inflate my lifestyle here. But in September 2024, that changed. I had just turned 28 and saw my portfolio getting close to 250,000 euros, and for a very long time, I had this goal in mind. At some point, I wanted to reward myself for all the hard work and discipline over the years. And that's how I eventually bought my first Rolex, a 36mm Rolex Datejust in steel and white gold. For me, it was more than just a watch. It was a symbol of all the discipline and hard work over the years. And that was officially the moment when I realized I didn't want to live quite so frugally anymore. I had done enough. And yes, and some of you might be familiar with the concept of coast fire. That describes saving a lot early on, and then, so to speak, being able to rest on that without making further contributions, just letting the money grow over the years. I had that thought as well, but for me, the goal is more fat fire, retiring early while still being able to enjoy a higher-end lifestyle, and for that, you need more wealth and higher contributions. Still, the foundation had been laid, and as I said, what matters much more to me is the absolute difference in euros between income and expenses, not trying to reduce expenses to the absolute minimum. If you currently can't earn more, then yes, reducing your expenses is absolutely the right thing to do. But as a second step, I would always think about how to increase my income, whether through my main job, a side hustle, or by building some form of self-employment. In the summer of 2025, I also sold my old car after 5 years and got myself this beautiful BMW. Of course, after 10 years on the road, it had already gone through most of its depreciation, and that too was a financially somewhat sensible decision. Well, let's say as sensible as it can be with a BMW. For me, that's what I call conscious consumption. That's the point. It wasn't an impulse purchase, but a reward for achieving one of my goals. And of course, I paid for the car in cash and didn't finance it. And I would say, with that, let's draw a conclusion. I have to honestly say it took a lot of effort for me to start spending money on luxury since autumn 2024. That's not how I was raised, and that's not how I was during my studies or in the years after. This is something new. And now I'm 29 years old. I'll be turning 30 this summer, and my portfolio is getting very close to breaking through the €500,000 mark. Looking back today, I have to say, all the sacrifice was absolutely worth it. It created precisely the right kind of mindset in me to lay the very necessary foundation for the wealth I have today. But without entrepreneurship, yes, and at the same time maximizing my income, I simply wouldn't have successfully reached the specific point where I am today at all. That's simply part of the truth. Frugalism is good, but when combined with entrepreneurship, it's the best thing ever. And no matter if you are 18 years old, 28, 38, 48, or 58, the best time to widen the gap between your income and your expenses is right now. Today, I no longer live frugally in the sense of always being thrifty. I consciously consume more, yet still keep my savings rate very high. Right now, I'm roughly at around 60 to 70%, and if I buy a BMW, then only because I can afford it without putting my financial freedom at risk. That's the goal, and that part is really important. I no longer have to save myself into the ground because the foundation is now in place. If you're just starting out, take this advice with you. In the beginning, save as much as you can, even if it's only 10, 20, or 50 euros a month. It doesn't matter. The point is to simply develop this habit of saving. But at the same time, invest as much as you can in your own skills and in your potential to earn more money. Because at the end of the day, a high income is the real turbo boost that can accelerate any FIRE goal. Whether you're aiming for coast FIRE, fat FIRE, lean FIRE, or simply a life with less financial stress, more freedom, and more peace of mind, that's what really matters. This was a very personal video for me, and I genuinely hope I've earned your like and subscription with it today. Now I'm curious, where is your focus right now? Are you mainly focused on saving, or are you more focused on increasing your income? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like, feel free to share your savings rate as well. With that, I wish you good returns and see you next time.